Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Glendale Special Transportation Parking Commission meeting for Tuesday, November 21st, 2023. My name is Shauna Bonston, and I'm the chairperson for the Glendale Transportation and Parking Commission. I'd like to read the following statement. For public comments and questions during the meeting, please call 818-937-8100. City staff will be submitting any questions and comments in real time to the appropriate person during this meeting. And with that, I'm calling this meeting to order at 6:01 p.m. May we have roll call, please?
Chairperson Bonston,
Present.
Commissioner Lester,
Here.
Commissioner Amirian,
Here.
Commissioner Ordubegyan,
Here.
Commissioner Avagian,
Here.
Commissioner Eubank.
Here.
Thank you.
What is the next item on the agenda, please?
Item 1B, flag salute.
What is the next item on the agenda, please?
Item 2, posting of the agenda. The agenda for the Tuesday, November 21, 2023 special meeting of the Glendale Transportation and Parking Commission was posted by August 16, 2023 before 5 p.m. on the bulletin board outside of City Hall. I'm sorry, November 16.
Thank you. And the next item on the agenda, please.
Item 3, introduction of Student Commissioner Eric Eubank.
Mr. Amrani, would you please introduce our new student commissioner?
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the TPC Commission. It's my pleasure to introduce Eric Eubank as our new student commissioner. We went through a process, very rigorous process for applicants and interviews, and Mr. Eubank came on top. And if you don't mind, I will ask him to give a quick 2-minute self-introduction.
My name is Eric Eubank. I am a senior at Crescenta Valley High School. And as the youth commissioner, I hope that I can provide like a voice for youth in the Glendale area, but also serve as kind of a liaison to the youth in the community to provide their perspective and also to help translate and communicate any progress that this commission makes. And personally, I hope that I gain some professional experience from this experience that I can take into future careers, whether or not it applies to what is specifically in this commission. But as a whole, I hope to make a difference in our community by serving as a youth voice as a part of this commission.
Thank you so much. We are so pleased to have you. What a wonderful addition to the team. Does anyone have any questions or want to join me in welcoming him? I think you can see the nods. Thank you.
Yes, welcome. And I always get very excited when I see students being very active and giving back to the community and participating and serving as a liaison. So welcome, and we're really happy to have you.
The next item, item 4, approval of minutes. Approval of minutes for the Special Transportation and Parking Commission meeting of August 21, 2023.
Oops, I just turned it off. If there are no comments or questions, do I have a motion approving the minutes of August 21st, 2023 special meeting?
I'll move.
Okay, and I'll second.
Chairperson Bonston,
Yes?
Commissioner Lester,
Yes.
Commissioner Ordubegyan,
Yes.
Commissioner Avagian,
Yes.
Commissioner Amirian,
Yes.
and Commissioner Eubank.
Yes.
Thank you.
What is the next item on the agenda?
Chair,
Yes?
just a point of order on the minutes, since Commissioner Eubank is joining us today. Yeah.
I was thinking the same thing. Does he have to recuse himself? If any commissioner that was not present in approving the minutes?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Can we redo?
I think he can just change his vote to an abstention.
I abstain from seconding the motion of approving the minutes.
Thank you.
That's on us. We should have warned you.
What is the next item on the agenda, please?
Item 5, presentations. There are no presentations for this meeting.
Very well. And the next item, please.
Item 6, consent items. We do not have any consent items at this time.
Thank you. And the next item, please.
Item 7, action items. We also do not have any action items at this time.
The next item on the agenda, then.
Item 8, public hearing. We do not have any items at this time.
And the next item on the agenda.
Item 7, informational report, project update bicycle transportation plan.
Excellent. And are we going to see a presentation first, or shall we?
Madam Chair, yes, we have Ms. Arzu Kamali from CDD, who's going to introduce the consultant for this project.
Thank you. And then we'll call speakers after that. Thank you so much.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Commission members. We appreciate the opportunity to be here today to provide you with update of bicycle transportation plan and seek your valuable comments and recommendations. As you may recall, our existing bicycle transportation plan was adopted on October 2012, recognizing the evolving need of our community. In February 2022, City Council directed staff to initiate the update of bicycle transportation plan. Our goal is to create a visionary framework for the next 20 years, outlining plans for planning, development, design, and maintenance of a safe and convenient and inviting bike network throughout Glendale. To ensure a comprehensive and inclusive approach, we have formed a dedicated project development team, and the team consists of diverse range of participants, including the representative of citywide departments, community members, and stakeholders, and members of TPC and Sustainability Commission. Their insight and experiences have been played a crucial role in our in shaping and informing our bicycle transportation plan. Our goal has been to engage our community in developing of bicycle transportation plan, and for that we had done an extensive outreach. Some of the events that we participated to are including Bike Safety Day at Pacific Park, or Bike Work Days, Earth Day celebration at GCC, and the last two ones are the open houses that we done at Spar Heights Community Center and Adult Recreation Center. Currently, our preliminary bike network is available online in bicycle transportation website for public feedback. And to provide further detail on bicycle transportation plan update and progress, I am pleased to introduce our consultant project manager, Sam Former from Bro Hopple. We are looking forward to hear your comments and inputs to create a more sustainable and accessible transportation network for the residents of Glendale. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Hello, yes. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. Well, Madam Commissioner, or Madam Chair, Commission members, thank you so much for having me. I couldn't have said it better myself than Arzu did, but I have a whole presentation that will go into the details of that. And I look forward to sharing that with you and also getting your comments and feedback at this critical stage of developing a bicycle transportation plan. So first, my name is Sam Fromer. I am a transportation and mobility consultant with Bureau Happold. I'm the project manager for this team, including Tool Design, which is a bicycle design and safety expert nationally, and then also Catherine Padilla Associates, who does our outreach experts here in Southern California. Next slide, please. And as Arzu said, we're here to collaboratively create the previous slide, a 20-year vision for the planning, development, and design of a convenient and inviting network for all of Glendale. I really want to emphasize this. This is a really important step in creating a obtainable and ambitious plan for the next 20 years for the city of Glendale that will connect the city from north to south and east to west with a bike network that is safe and usable for residents and visitors and people who work and play in Glendale. Next slide, please. So tonight I'm just gonna give some project context, talk about some existing conditions, our safety analysis. I'm gonna talk a bit about our public engagement, which Arzu has also touched on, the project goals, and then we'll start to talk about the network development and recommendations for the development of the preliminary network, and the next steps. Next slide, please. So first, our project context, as Arzu said, next slide, please. We're building on the foundation created by the 2012 bike plan. The bike plan, the 2012 bike plan relied heavily on Sharrows, which I'll explain in more detail in a bit about what that means if you're not familiar. And you know, the city of Glendale has a lot of heavy commuter traffic and it's a pretty large destination for shopping, regional retail, and also employment. You're constrained by the mountains on either side. You're also a very diverse community. You're facing challenges from climate change, and we have some really exciting projects coming to the city, the Verdugo Wash project, which recently received $6 million in grant money, and then also the Metro BRT project, which will bring high quality rapid bus service to the city east to west, and along with that, a bike lane. So next slide, please. And Glendale really is an ideal biking city. It has great weather, it is dense, you have an intact traditional street grid, it's mixed use, a lot of distances are short. Next slide, please. But there's also some real challenges and real barriers. Several freeways crisscross the city because of where it is regionally, right between downtown LA and the San Fernando Valley. You're kind of squeezed between all these mountains. That's also why all of the water and all of the freeways and all of the railroads go through Glendale, right? And so those create real barriers to crisscrossing the city on foot, on bike, and also by car, right? Next slide, please. And so your existing bike network, as I mentioned before, really relies heavily on Sharrows, which is really just some markings on the pavement, possibly some signage, and that's about it. There's no real separation or protection on most streets that have bike facilities. And this creates a disconnected and low coverage network and doesn't feel safe or enjoyable to bike in Glendale. And so you end up having less than 10 miles of what's called a class 2 bike lane, which is your traditional bike lane, the ones you see on Glen Oaks. And I'll just say that most of those Class 2 bike lanes are on Glen Oaks, which is 3 lanes in either direction. You have a bus on there. There's a lot going on Glen Oaks, right? So most of your Class 2 bike lanes are on a street that many people would not feel comfortable biking on. I'll just also point out that the city of Glendale is about 10 miles from top to bottom, and you have about 10 miles of Class 2 bike lanes. And so you can start to see how disconnected the bike network is and how it doesn't really serve local trips, let alone regional trips across the city. Next slide, please. Just a quick primer on bike lane types. I'm going to be referencing these throughout. We can jump back to this slide. I will be showing this slide later when we start talking about the preliminary bike network. So just again, quick primer. We have Class 1 or multi-use paths. These are your trails that are completely removed from roadways, feel really safe. They're usually along rivers or through parks. You have your Class 4 protected bike lanes. You really don't have these in the city of Glendale at the moment, other than on Los Feliz, down by Atwater Village, leading over into Atwater. These are protected bike lanes within the roadway, usually protected by parked cars or some other barrier. Then you have your classic Class 2 bike lane. As you can see in the photo there, that's your striped bike lane, usually along the curb or the parking lane. And then we have a Class 2 climbing lane. So that's on two-way roads that go uphill. In the uphill direction, you have a bike lane so that people who are going slowly up the hill biking have a dedicated space. And then in the downhill direction, you have sharrows. And you use that on streets that are narrow and you can't fit a traditional bike lane or Class 2 bike lane in either direction. And that works because obviously in the downhill direction, cyclists can move much more quickly. Okay, and then you have your Class 3 or sharrows, bike routes. The image all the way to the right, that's what you have now all over the city, your traditional sharrow. And then what we'll be talking about later in the presentation are Class 3 bike boulevards. And this is really important because our preliminary recommendations rely heavily on these. And what this is a low volume neighborhood street, generally fairly narrow, not a lot of traffic, not a lot of fast moving vehicles, that you then add on top of that a lot of traffic calming to discourage through traffic, to slow down the existing traffic and make cyclists walking and biking there really feel safe and inviting. And so you do that through a combination of different traffic calming measures such as chicanes, traffic circles, bump outs, and speed humps. Okay, that's it for bike lane types. Moving on to our safety analysis. Next slide, please. Thank you. So any bike plan will include a crash analysis or safety analysis. So we looked at 10 years of crash data in the city, looking at not only killed and severely injured crashes, but also regular injuries and then property damage only. And I'll just point out that we made some changes to the methodology, the crash methodology, based on feedback from our project development team. They wanted to see the PDO or property damage only crashes. And they also wanted to see 10 years of data. So we updated that methodology and included that. And if we go to the next slide, we'll see a zoom in on downtown Glendale, where all of our primary safety corridors are. We also got feedback from the project development team on this and updated this map based on that conversation. So we've highlighted the 10 primary safety corridors. All of these streets share something in common. They're wide, they have a lot of traffic volume on them. And then when there's not a lot of volume on it, people can speed very easily because they are wide. Many of these serve as connectors to the freeway and other regional destinations like the malls or other larger employers. So there's definitely a pattern here. These are also where people want to go, right? And these are the destinations, so that's why people are biking or walking and driving these streets. Next slide, please. The good news is that crashes over time have decreased. However, that might not all be good news. It might, we can't fully know why crashes have decreased over time. Some explanatory factors might be there are fewer people biking. I'll just mention that this also follows a similar trend for the LA County. So reasons could be fewer people are biking. There was a safety education campaign in 2018. And then the pandemic obviously caused everything to change. And so we would expect, like changes in the crashes as well. Next slide, please. So to summarize, and I'm showing some maps here that I haven't yet talked about, but they include other analyses that we've looked at. That, like I said, Glendale can be a really great biking city, especially downtown and West Glendale, where destinations are close together, the grid is intact, it's flat as compared to the rest of the city. And so when we look at all of these different factors as we are currently, as we develop our recommendations and we lay them over one another, and I'll be talking about this more in a couple of minutes, we start to see where there is really great potential for biking, for safety improvements, for helping people get to their destinations, run their errands in their local neighborhood without having to drive. Next slide, please. All right, so now I'm going to talk about our public engagement process. So we've had a very extensive, and will continue to have throughout the rest of the project, outreach process. This has included a wide range of people getting involved. We've had our project development team, which Arzu described, and they've been wonderful. They're super involved. They know this city back and forth. They've provided great feedback. They've also been really helpful in getting people to turn out to our events or provide feedback online. Speaking of which, we had a community survey in the spring and into the early summer that had a great response. We've attended a ton of pop-up events. We've recently had 2 community open houses that Arzu also referred to. And then, as Arzu also mentioned, we currently have our interactive online web map where people can see the preliminary network, comment on it, add points, add lines, and make suggestions there. Next slide, please. And our outreach has included multilingual flyers. We've been contacting people via the project's email list, other city email lists, community newsletters, through the PDT, press releases, and social media. And we also have our project website as well. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we did a online survey, which we also offered in person at events in the spring, and the response was incredible. Or I'll just say that we had it in 4 languages, and we're really asking about what's it like to bike in Glendale now? What are your priorities? What do you care about? And some basic demographic information. Next slide, please. I get ahead of myself sometimes. So the next slide. The survey response was really incredible. I don't know if you've run a lot of surveys in your life, but we got over 400 responses, which is pretty large. And we had a couple of open-ended questions, like tell us about a place in Glendale where you don't feel safe or where you'd like to see improvements. And we had over 300 responses to those questions as well. I know that sometimes when I'm taking a survey, I skip the questions where there's not multiple choice and it's just an empty box. So the people of Glendale really care, and they have opinions, and they have let them, they're excited to let us know, and that has been really helpful in our process as well. And it's just, it is so strikingly clear, the outcomes from not only the survey, but all of the other outreach that we've done, that people care about safety, they care about connectivity, and they want a bike network that is usable. Next slide, please. Just to put a finer point on that, when we asked how safe do you feel to biking in your community, over 75% of people reported feeling unsafe or very unsafe. And again, people's top 3 priorities were safety, not enough bike lanes, and that the bike lanes don't go where they want to go. Next slide, please. As mentioned, we have our project development team. We've gone to them to discuss our crash methodology and existing conditions, goals and objectives, how to do outreach, how to reach people, and then most recently looking at the preliminary network that we'll be also going through later tonight. And they've, again, like I said, it's incredible how knowledgeable they all are and how much they care and show up to meetings and stay till the very end and then talk afterwards. And so it's just been an incredible group of people to work with. Next slide. We've also had a ton of events. We've reached over 600 people in person and over 400 people online. Here are some photos of the events. We've gone to other city events where we'll set up a table and talk to people. If you go to the next slide, we're listing 12 events here: the Earth Day celebration, the Future of Energy at Central Library, things that are both related and not obviously directly related to biking. And then on the next slide, we recently had our 2 open houses on November 11th and 12th. These were dedicated bicycle transportation plan events where people could learn about the project, see large maps of the city and comment on those and talk to us about these preliminary bike maps and other recommendations related to the bike plan. This was super successful. It was like basically busy the entire time. Like I was saying, people are just really excited and involved here in the city. It's like got an incredible civic life, the city of Glendale. And then finally on the next slide, as mentioned, we have our web map, which will be open until December 6th. So that will be open for 4 weeks. And we'll soon start looking at the comments that we've been receiving there and start culling those comments and start organizing them as the month continues, so that we are ready to start integrating those comments along with all the other feedback we received in person through our outreach, so we can start drafting our next version of the bike network, which I will talk about in more detail soon. So next slide. Through our outreach and through our PDT, we've also developed a set of project goals. And like I said, safety has really been the clear priority all along. People really don't feel safe biking in Glendale today. And then connectivity is the second one. Even if you are willing or able to bike in Glendale, the bike network isn't very useful and doesn't connect you to where you want to go. And what we keep hearing is people basically want accessibility. They want a bike network that is safe and usable for all people and all ages, all abilities. And then we want to prioritize areas of equity concern. We've done a whole equity analysis, and we'll be looking at that as we create project priorities in later phases. And then, working with both the PDT and city staff, we want to a bike plan that is implementable. We want to be ambitious. We want to have a long vision of where we're going, but we also want to be able to build it. And then finally, this bike plan has the potential to have positive impacts on both public health and the environment. And so we want to keep those in mind as we move through this and develop this bike plan. Next slide, please. So the moment I've been alluding to this whole time. So how did we develop this bike network? And really it starts with the goals that I just talked about, right? And primarily safety and connectivity. And then it's been clear from the beginning that the public input is really important to this process. We've heard that from city staff, we've heard that from the PDT, we've heard that from city council. And so combining those, we then want to take, we also developed or, borrowed network principles, which I'll explain in a moment, both the Spiderweb and connected neighborhoods. And then moving into the next step, we use that to develop a network, which will then we then look at what facility, what type of bike lane is appropriate for each street. And so we look at both the Federal Highway Administration, that's national guidance, NACDO, which is the National Association of City Transportation Officials, that's also national guidance, and then Caltrans has their own guidance as well. And so what we've done is we've combined all these factors to draft our first network, draft number 1. We then took that to city staff and went through a drafting process with them, took their feedback and created a second draft. We then took that to the project development team, got a lot of great feedback from them, and that created our next draft. And now we're at this step number 4, where we have our web map. We're coming to you all, and we'll be going to the Sustainability Commission as well. And then we've also done our public outreach, got a lot of great feedback in person. And so we'll be taking all of that information and we're sorting through it. And that will help us develop the next iteration of the map that we will then present to City Council. And the reason I'm emphasizing this is because this has been a really iterative and collaborative process. I'm not from Glendale. You all know Glendale much better than me, and so this is and the rest of the project team. So like this is where the rubber meets the road, and we get are able to balance different priorities and different needs and create a really robust bike plan. Next slide, please. So just to quickly talk about our network principles, there's 2 here. The spiderwebs, basically we want kind of like main corridors that connect primary areas of the city and then connected neighborhoods. Within the neighborhood, Glendale has all these wonderful little pocket neighborhoods with small commercial areas that are surrounded by residential areas. So we want people to be able to safely bike to those commercial centers, those neighborhood centers, and then connect again to the spiderweb cities, kind of like larger connections that take you from one neighborhood to the next. Next slide, please. And so going back to our goals, we're looking at the way we developed our first draft was we looked at our safety analysis, our connectivity analysis, and the public input we received in the first phase of the project, primarily through our survey, which we mapped responses of where people would like to bike and didn't feel safe. And we combined all of that to get a draft network. But those are just lines on maps. That doesn't tell you what kind of facility, what kind of bike lane should go on each corridor. So then on the next slide, this is what I was just talking about. We use national and local guidance to determine what type of bike facility is appropriate for each road. And really, again, the priority here is safety. It is not, if we've determined already that a certain street should have a bike lane on it, then the question is, what is the safe type of bike facility that would go there, not what is the most convenient to build. And so that's based on the speed on the roadway, the average daily traffic, that's ADT, so how many vehicles are on that roadway on average, the width of the roadway, and then the local context. We all know that a narrow, slow, quiet street is much more comfortable to bike on than a Brand or Central or Colorado or any of these other large downtown streets, right? And so the wider, the busier, the less safe a street is, the more robust a bike facility you need. So that's what this guidance leads us to, right? So on these quiet streets, we can use things like bike boulevards or regular class 2 bike lane. And then as the street gets wider, busier, more hectic, you need more robust bike facilities like a protected bike lane at class 4. So, thank you. Next slide. Yeah. So then just as a quick reminder, this is our existing network, right? Disconnected, not a lot of bike facilities, doesn't take you where you need to go. And here is our preliminary network on the next slide. And So again, what we really tried to focus on is safety and connectivity. We're relying a lot on bike boulevards, on some of the parallel quiet streets to make these connections. And we really just like beefed up the network across the city, connected the city. We include the Verdugo Wash here, which will be a really important north-south spine for bike connectivity, for regional bike connectivity, not necessarily local trips. The Metro BRT project will be a really important east-west connector for the city. And then we have built, the network out from there. Now on the next slide, again, as I said, I would show you this again in case you forgot. Here there are different bike facilities. We can always pop back to this as we get into questions. On the next slide, just wanted to linger for a moment on bike boulevards. As I said, they're really for low stress biking, and so use a lot of physical intervention, signage, striping, diverters, traffic circles, speed humps to really create that safe biking environment. And then on the next slide, maybe I already emphasized this enough, but just wanted to provide another photo of these climbing lanes. These become really important in the northern end of the city where it gets really hilly, as you all know. So yeah, in the uphill direction, you have a Class 2 facility, and then in the downhill direction, you have Sheriff's. Next slide, please. Almost at the end, y'all. So next steps, as I said, we will be drafting our next version of the preliminary map based on feedback we've gotten at the open houses, the web map comments from our commissioners, and then we'll be presenting that to City Council in January. And then as part of our final bike plan, we'll be developing a project phasing. We'll be looking at some quick wins, things we can do in the first couple of years to make a large impact, and then phasing that from there over time. What are our next priorities, and what is possible maybe in the longer term, 10, 15, 20 years. So that concludes the formal part of the presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Do we have any speakers or any further presentation from staff?
We do not have any speakers at this time.
Well, with no speakers at this time, I imagine the board or the commission will give some comments and questions. Can I start with kind of a point of clarity about our discussion for today? So I'm in reading the kind of agenda item and the report. This is an informational report on a project update. And so I just want to clarify, so this is not a recommendation that we're giving to council. So there's not a vote that we're giving, but instead you are seeking comments and questions that we may have that you would incorporate into the draft. I just want to make sure I understand and we're all on the same page.
That is correct, on any feedbacks that you have.
Okay, and that differs. Certain types of decisions might come to us that may be in fact recommendations that we are making decisions on. Because I know that we've had others that there was a little bit of confusion amongst the board ourselves, led by myself, to be confused. Okay, that's helpful. And then the ending of the presentation clarified for me the point that we were kind of talking about, like how important this moment is and what the next steps are. So I understand that there's a collection of information that's being kind of processed from the outreach meetings as well as our commission and Sustainability Commission. I'm curious why, I guess, that we are not seeing a version that the council will see. Yeah, I guess that's my question, is why wouldn't we see it when it's closer to being completed? Obviously, we would like to have our comments, put into it, but can you address that a little bit? Can you address that?
Madam Chair, I'm going to ask the CDD team to come up and answer that question.
Madam Chair, I'm Fred Zoravan. I'm the principal planner for City of Glendale. And that process could be done if you time, also we can come back to and, present the final one or semi-final one and get your input again and go back to council. That depend. It might change our timing and also schedule, but if the chairman would like to do that and the commissioner would like to see it, it could be done.
Okay. And, let's see how the discussion goes. But it seems, I was just kind of referring to whether that was an established process or not to better understand like where our input is. It feels like a little difficult to know if there's still input coming in, what we're kind of responding to, and what the final will look like by the time it goes to council.
Just for clarity, your comment is going to be included in our report to the city council.
Right.
And then we go to city council. We are not asking for the approval or anything. We got to get their comment, and that comment is going to come, if we need to come back to you guys and to chairman and our support, we could do that. It depends on your schedule and timing of this.
I guess a point of clarity for that. So the council is not making it an approval in January.
Not at that time.
So
No,
is this
no,
really
it's
just a
gonna be-
check-in on the status of really the corridor, what am I looking at? Network and the kind of analysis assumptions?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Just the approach that we're taking
Okay.
and also input that we got it and hear their advice and
Understood.
their direction.
And when do we think we might hear the full of the bike plan?
Well, I would assume our schedule is supposed to be finished by February or maybe early March.
All
That's our schedule. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Were there any other questions just on the topic of kind of process? Okay, well then I think we can talk about substance.
Sure.
I'll open it up to anyone who wants to start. Commissioner Lester?
Yes, thanks very much. This is an exciting moment. This plan is really about the future of the city. It's 20 years, so I sort of see this as the start of a conversation about a big way to look at the development of the city, what it's going to be like for people living here, our kids, et cetera. It's exciting because the state of the art for basically bicycle facilities has really changed a lot since the original bike plan 10 years ago was approved. It's changed at a dizzying pace. Basically, I think something to take into this conversation is to keep in mind when it comes to people on bikes in the city, like the other non-automotive modes, is how many people are currently being deterred from choosing to have this be a more multimodal city. Like, we have city plans that are forwarding this idea of multimodalism, but it's hard to tell really how much demand there is for these other ways of getting around, because very clearly people are being deterred. Yeah, I mean, there's a funny joke that kind of applies to bike infrastructure. I think goes something like, it's not necessarily productive to try to judge the demand for a bridge by looking how many people are swimming across a river. Especially maybe like a piranha-infested river. Right now, people riding in Glendale are kind of like those swimmers. I ride to school with my older son every day, and it's amazing how every few weeks someone comes up to me and says, "We see you, and we want to do that too." And the kid will say, "I want to do that." And some of them try, and a few of them have stuck with it, but most people drop out. They try it and then decide, this is really, I don't feel good about this. They ask me, how do you do this? Is it easy? Is it possible? And I can say yes, but I can't say it's safe. So I think as we go forward, I think something that I expect we can all agree on this commission is that the status quo is dangerous for drivers. See our high insurance rates, people walking and people biking. So I'm hoping that that can be a starting point for the discussion. So yeah, I was privileged to be able to represent the commission along with Commissioner Avagian at the in the PDT, and it was a great process. So thank you to the city staff and the people running it. I think one other point I wanted to make before I moved to my questions was we basically, there's a bit of a gap between getting to, basically, like, there's a space between getting to that multimodal city that is, you can't get to the station. You can't get across the barrier. So, as much as what we'd love to see in the future is for Metro to expand in such a way that it becomes practical for more people to use other modes. There is a limit to how much the road network can be expanded. Congestion is more or less a given for the foreseeable future. But to get to the stations, there's not likely to be a time when you can step out of your kitchen into a train car or a bus. You need to get from where you are to where these other facilities are that open the region to you. And so that's where these other modes, walking and biking, really are part of that. So any serious discussion about like a multimodal future, in my view, it needs to include taking those other modes seriously, making it safe, making it appealing, making it practical. And so those are my main, those are my first comments. I had a few questions about the plan that's being presented, the map that's being presented tonight, which is, it's basically has to do with the differences between the draft map we saw in August and what has appeared here. I think that I think basically like this plan is extremely promising, and it's as it stands here is a big improvement. But I am a little bit concerned about this issue of disconnection. And there's a few little places that I wanted to ask about. Okay, so one of them is for Central Avenue, there's the section between Glen Oaks and Doran. So it's the north section of Central here. There's a gap there between what's going to be a very high quality facility on Glen Oaks and Central Avenue. And I've noted that there doesn't seem to be any parking in that section. It's pretty wide. And I just wondered if that section could be considered as part of a connection for Central. There's also a little section just north of Broadway where that lane that now exists disappears. And I wonder about that because it's about getting it to be a through lane. And then the major thing is Glendale Avenue. Now, this Glendale Avenue was presented as part of the draft plan for bicycle facility, and it's been removed. I would like to look into ways to look at facilities there. For example, a two-way lane on one side. The reason is that when I look at the map, I'm seeing a lot of facilities, but I'm not seeing them as through facilities, like all the way from the top to the bottom. And Glendale Avenue in particular is just, there's so many destinations there. And it is, it's one of the important roads. It's one of the dangerous roads. So I would like to see about the possibility of reinstating that as the plan goes forward. And I'd be interested too, to my fellow commissioners, if there's any support for that idea. Along with potentially the other major through route here, which is Colorado. The Colorado facility is set to end at Glendale. To the west of that, it disappears. And I feel like that, that section has been approved for multiple housing developments, and it seems strange that that area would be left as essentially an on and off ramp zone, when it could be another one of these through paths. So my request would be that this plan be kept as open as possible, especially those things I just mentioned going forward to council. This is public space, and I think it would behoove us all to remember that all decisions about transportation are inherently political, and it's our elected leaders who should be making, who should have as much of a say as possible. So those are my basic comments. I have a few more, but I don't want to talk forever. So thanks.
Thank you. Any other commissioners?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions and some comments as well. I have some questions regarding just some methodology stuff and things that were unclear to me. So, page 13 or slide 13, which was the crashes over time slide. So just so that I understand, the blue line, it represents the total number of LA County crashes over that time period, while the red bars indicate the total number of Glendale. That's injuries and fatal crashes. So just basically any bicycle crash that resulted in an injury, correct?
That is correct.
So if I'm reading that graph correctly, LA County had 2,000 injury and fatal crashes, so population of 11 million approximately, while Glendale had 20.
That's correct.
So considering the population of Glendale and the population of LA County, would I be correct to assume that Glendale on average has a lower number of injury and fatal crashes per capita than LA County in general?
That is one way of looking at the data, yes.
What would another way of looking at the data be?
You could look at exposure rates, so not just total population, but how many people are biking. So I think on a per capita basis, how many people bike. So that's your exposure. And then how many people are injured. We're just looking at the raw numbers here to show that the trend in Glendale injuries and fatalities mirrors that of the broader region.
Understood. Do you have data on exposure in terms of the propensity or the number of bike riders compared to the county as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, you could look at, we can look at census data basically, which only covers commute trips, so people who bike to work, as opposed to all other types of bike trips. So it's not a perfect proxy.
Okay. On page 19, there's the survey, and it indicates that there were 413 respondents. I had a couple questions about that. Were there demographic questions in terms of the respondents included in the survey?
Yeah, we asked people where they lived, and I can pull up the full results. Just give me a second, please. Which we did map actually, and most people were from the city of Glendale.
Do you have
but it
an
was just
approximate percentage?
I don't have that off the top of my head, but maybe during the next segment I can search for that while someone else is speaking. I'm sorry that I don't have that right.
No, no worries. I was just curious about what the demographics of the responses look like. But I would like to see that information.
Yeah, we shared the full responses with the PDT, so we can share those with you as well.
Excellent. What's the definition of an area of equity concern? I think I have an idea of what it is, but I wanted to make sure.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we used the California Healthy Places Equity Index, which is a statewide index created by the Public Health Alliance of Southern California, and they look at 23 different community characteristics, including job opportunities, access to healthcare, housing, education, transportation, clean air, and water. And they quantify all of those things and create an index that that's then ranked by quintiles. So you have your lowest 20%, your next 20, 20, you know, up until your highest 20%. That's an existing equity index that's used throughout the state. So that is what we used.
Got it. And then in the section, you know, for project goals where it states, you know, that number 5, for example, is implementable, is there some metric of estimated cost of what the recommended preliminary network would look like?
That is actually one of the future tests that we'll be taking on and have started to assemble. Once we have a mostly finished bike network map, then we will be able to quantify the cost of that. And the way that we'll do that is we are currently working on developing a unit cost by facility type. So, you know, how much money does it cost to build a mile of class 1, class 2, class 3 bike lane, et cetera. And so we're looking at both projects within the city and then regionally and across the state to get an estimate of what that would cost. And then there's, you know, soft costs that get factored into that. And then, I'm sorry, the short answer is the plan will include a costing exercise.
Excellent. And then, you know, kind of attached to that, do the recommendations regarding the preliminary network take into account effects on people that don't ride bikes? You know, effects on traffic, you know, response times for first responders, if their lanes need to be, you know, shrunk in any way or lanes are removed. Did this take into account those effects?
Yeah, so because this is a citywide bike plan that will be phased in over many, many years, that is those types of analyses like impacts on congestion at certain intersections or corridors, emergency response times, vehicle mile traveled, level of service, all of these very technical and detailed analyses, those are not conducted as part of a citywide bike plan. This sets a plan and a vision for biking in the city. And then as individual projects are conceived, funded, and implemented, those types of studies will take place. And this has been an extensive conversation that we've been having with Public Works and CDD about what those types of analyses require. But this is basically what happens across the country is you develop a plan for the full city over 2 decades. And then as you implement, you do those types of analyses. And then ultimately you make a decision, right, about what your priorities are. If you're willing to tolerate a little more congestion for improved safety along a corridor or an intersection. Not that that's always the trade-off, but that is an example of one trade-off.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's definitely a multivariate analysis, but I was just wondering if that was analyzed as part of this, and you answered that. I appreciate it. Just some comments. Look, I appreciate the work that went into this, and I think it is really important for a city like Glendale that is one of, it's one of the best cities in the country. I think it's really important that these types of alternative modes of travel are considered and planned out in a thoughtful way, and looked at holistically. I do want to caution just people in general. I mean, I've heard a lot of talk in the 35 years that I've lived in Glendale about Glendale being this unsafe city to drive in, to walk in, and look, some of that had its bearings in truth, and you can look at statistics for sure. But I think recently, there's been information that's come to light, including a recent, report by Consumer Affairs that ranked Glendale as, the number 7 safest city with a population over 100,000, to drive in, and that took into account pedestrian accidents. What it ranked specifically were the safest drivers with populations over 100,000. So I hear a lot of people just kind of throw out these impressions that were based on old information, and I would just caution people that if you do that in other walks of life, you get accused of stereotyping, and I think in this case, it is really important to look at the data and to look at reports like this. Glendale continues to be, lead the country in a lot of different areas, and I think, safety is one of them, and I would like Glendale to continue doing that. But there has to be talks not just about how anecdotally individuals feel at any given moment, because there's a lot of, trust me, I understand driving on Glen Oaks. I wouldn't want my 12-year-old to ride his bike on Glen Oaks Boulevard. But I don't really know if I would have, my son ride his bike on Glen Oaks Boulevard, even if there was a protected lane, just given the speed that exists on that thoroughway. So the idea and this talk about, well, the city feels unsafe, or the drivers are bad, or that has to be rooted in data. All of this has to be rooted in data, and it is important that people feel safe. And I understand that some of these considerations are based upon a relative look at how a bicyclist might feel in terms of comfort on any given roadway. But I would like this commission and the city council, because I've seen some city council members say, I don't care what, that those reports say. I know that Glendale is not a safe, drivers aren't safe in Glendale. And I think that's ridiculous. So if we are going to evaluate these types of decisions, we have to, one, take into account not only what the impacts are on potential bike riders, but we have to look at what the impacts are on costs to the city, both direct and indirect, how it affects non-bike riders. And we have to talk about some of these things based upon actual data rather than just, you know what, this particular thing feels unsafe to, you know, X or Y or Z. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to go?
Okay, I will partially second Commissioner Marianne on looking closer to the data because, yes, of course, I'm very pro alternative transportation being implemented in the city, but yes, at the same time, we definitely have to understand how it affects existing non-bike riders at the same time. But Glendale is a developing city, so I am actually looking forward to seeing more bike riders. When we say that some people feel unsafe, I am, it's maybe in this case, maybe a subjective approach, but I'm one of those people that feels unsafe. Yes, I would not want my 10-year-old, 12-year-old, even 15-year-old driving on Glen Oaks, but I would want 21-year-old, 23-year-old biking to their work or going and taking scooter or bicycle as a regular transportation method for them. So I am actually driving and looking forward to that. Also, first of all, I wanted to thank actually the team who's working on this. Sam, thank you very much. And then Arizu, Fred, everyone, you guys are awesome. And I'm honored to be part of the Bicycle Transportation Planning Committee, along with Commissioner Lester, as he mentioned earlier. And it's just phenomenal. It's amazing. A lot of good ideas are coming up during the meetings, and I'm looking forward to seeing all those in the near future implemented. And another thing is implementation is a very, very important factor as well, because I'm afraid of the fact that a lot of things that are being approved later not being implemented. Not that it's not being implemented to the fullest, sometimes it's not even being implemented like half of it, because a lot of things changed, and I don't know, different other projects come up, and then one thing contradicts another thing. So I hope that whatever is being approved is going to be approved, is actually going to be implementable. So that's another thing, and that I would want to stress out to make sure that in the future, whatever we work on, we make sure that it's implementable. And seconding Commissioner Lester's comment about Colorado and Glendale Boulevard, I'm also noticing that Brent Boulevard is not on there too. And when we were making the notes and then presenting our plans during the meeting, Brent Boulevard was there too. We actually came up with a cool idea during the meeting, having a small block of the Brent Boulevard being actually closed for drivers and making it a walkable place from Harvard to Broadway. So it's not on there too. I don't know if that's something that can be implemented, or what kind of a data had we gathered on that idea, that one. And then also we had a cool idea about it on Honolulu too. Honolulu, am I correct? I think, yeah, it was the Honolulu Boulevard. So that's not on there too. So, and I would like to see that. That's all for my comments at this point. Yes, I would like to see more data, and I would like to see if those ideas are not being included in the proposal as a main one, at least we can have maybe an option 2, option 3 to see, because during the meetings, we actually split 2 groups, and then we present our ideas and our proposals. And I don't know how at the end they come up with one. So I would like to see a couple of them maybe to have those options, or maybe, I don't know, some kind of, I don't know, notes, points, whatever is comfortable, as long as we can get the full idea of whatever options we have. So far, that's it. I don't think I have any other comments. Yeah, thank you very much, and thanks again to the team.
Sure. Thank you very much. we cannot have unreasonable expectations. With the rate that the apartment buildings are being built up in City of Glendale, that's going to invite a ton of people that want to come to City of Glendale. And they all drive, they all bike, they all do all that stuff. I just don't understand, anytime that we're talking about safety, it has to correlate with bike lanes. Is there any other alternatives for safety in City of Glendale besides bike lanes? And then why aren't we not implementing more buses? Have you been at the bus station? You have to wait for hours for a bus to come along. And, I don't understand. If there are buses that are electric, they're environmental friendly, we can implement it, spend less money to take people from one end to the other, and then encourage people to walk and do other stuff. And we're just trying to implement, for example, you're mentioning Glendale Boulevard. Have you been traveling on Glendale Boulevard lately? Do you know if you take one lane out of it, it will be impossible to drive at that street? It is impossible. I do that every day, and there's so many other streets too. I am not against bike lane. I do want them in there. But what I'm saying is that if there is a program that it intake of 20 years of studying and then try to, as Commissioner Lester mentioned, then after, or you mentioned it too, that after 20 years we only see 1 or 2 items of that gets implemented. That is not right. If we are spending the money on the studies that it could have an immediate impact on everyone's bottom line, they need to be implemented, but they need to be implemented correctly. That means that first, if we can do the sharrows, if we can do the lines that indicates that this is designated for bike lanes, why aren't we implementing that? That costs nothing. I'm tired of listening that, if you want to do one thing, for example, you want to dress up a bench, it costs you $300,000. What are you trying to do? Gold plate that bench? So that is not what we want to do. We want to find out what is it that will have an immediate impact on people's traveling as far as buses, and what can we implement something right now, today, put a sharrows to see if people are using it, and then try to enforce it. And if it does work, and if you see that the traffic slows down and people are riding that bicycle at that place, then we're going to secure it. We have to start somewhere. Talking about it is not going to get us anywhere. That's what my thing is. And we keep on building and building and inviting more people to come to Glendale, which is good. We're, embracing a bigger city and all of that stuff, but that creates more traffic. By creating more traffic, you cannot take away the roads and the streets and try to implement bikes and say, okay, don't drive your car, try to drive the bike. How are you going to shop? Are you grocery shopping on a bike? I haven't seen anybody, few people, but I haven't seen a lot of people doing that. So in order to encourage people to do grocery shopping on a bicycle, there's got to be a sustainable network. We got to start one pocket that it is possible to do, and we need to do it now. Do it, let's implement it, let's see the result is, then we can go and start putting it on other parts without imposing on the people that actually don't want to ride a bike. So we need to include everybody in here. That's my 2 cents.
It's not inventing a new bicycle if I say that sharrows are not gonna really change anything. Everyone knows that, and it's not making it safer. And it's actually, if we get to the point that people, there are a lot of bike riders who are using the same roads as the car drivers, you're still gonna get traffic, because anyway, it's not the same speed. And unsafety is actually going to grow, that percentage of that being unsafe, injuries and everything. So I totally understand where you're coming from. I do get it, but sharrows is not a change. It's not a real change if we're trying to change an infrastructure.
I understand. I just had a quick...
Mark? Okay,
Sorry.
But if you're really trying to change an infrastructure and adopt it to bike riders or alternative transportation, it can be electric bikes, it can be electric scooters, it can be anything else. So if we're really trying to change an infrastructure, then sharrows is not the way to do it.
Not the sharrows. What I was saying is that, do we want to see some sort of a change? At least something that allows bicyclists to bike, right? So what I'm saying then, so you rather wait 10 years to implement something with a buffer than not having that. I'm just saying, let's do that. And if it proves that it's sustainable, then we'll just go ahead, put the buffers and all the other stuff that, why are we not want to put that in there, that it doesn't cost as much? Because for us to wait for that thing to be implemented, as you mentioned, it may take 20 years, right? So on the street, there is nothing right now. So why don't we put that right now, right this minute, and see how it goes? And then, approve upon that.
I'm going to suggest we just hear once from all the other commissioners, and we can come back to your points. Would you like to go? Please.
I would just like to start by saying that I'm very excited that there is a very comprehensive plan to address bike safety, because I know many people that I know use bikes and use that as their means of transportation. And I know that I have 2 younger brothers, and they're really excited to start learning how to ride bikes and everything, and use that as something that they use to get around, even if obviously it's very local because they're still pretty young. But I do think that it's really great that there is this plan to address the safety concerns that people have. And something that I was thinking of, and this is kind of what the conversation was going toward, was kind of how this plan will kind of address the future, because I think that Commissioner Lester said that, of course, this is a very long-term plan, and I think kind of seeing how the people who are currently deterred by the safety issues or by the accessibility issues, I am kind of curious to see how this isn't really a question, this is just kind of a hypothetical, but seeing how the needs for improved safety will change as we have more people using the bicycle plan, the improved bicycle safety. So I guess I'm just curious to see how obviously this is a 20-year plan, but how it will evolve as more people begin to use these improved bicycle lanes or sharrows or any form of this safety precautions. But I also think that kind of another broad hypothetical, I guess, is that I know that one big facet of the very beginning of the presentation was that there is already a declining accidents when it comes to bicycles on the graph with comparing LA County and Glendale. And I guess my question is that I'm curious if this plan is kind of addressing that, or whether this plan is based on the current data, based on the changes from COVID, or if it is from prior to, and kind of how there might be differences with that, and whether or not bicycle safety is more of an issue now or less of an issue based on the changes that happened with COVID. Yeah, that's kind of just a broader hypothetical that I'm kind of curious to see as this obviously evolves, because it is a very long plan. But yeah, just overall, I'm very happy and excited to see that this is something that is undergoing.
Thank you so much. I'll take the floor just to kind of kick off some of my initial thoughts too, and I do also want to start by thanking both of you for representing us so well on the PDT. It's an acronym that doesn't roll off my tongue, but thank you so much, and for staff as well. I did go to one of the outreach events, and it was very well attended, very just a good vibe. People are really interested and active and participating. So I appreciate, again, everyone's effort to really get out there. I want to echo a couple of the comments that I heard, and I'll just start in the order that I was taking notes. But I agree with some of the comment on the data being very helpful, and maybe even a bit of clarity needed. I thought that, particularly with the staff report on page 3, which the information was then repeated in our presentation on the crash data, it was a little confusing to me to be looking at the rates per capita versus the rates per rider. And I think there's 2 different things, which is understanding how many riders per capita do we have, and then what are the accident rates for the riders? Because obviously if you have a very few folks riding, the per capita rate for injury is less, and it's kind of, to unpack that, I think would be a little bit more helpful. I did really appreciate that there was fairly minimal, very little class 3 bike routes. So we were really, the plan really looks to have an increased level of kind of protection and a high quality bike bike routes. So I appreciate that. I was also interested, the staff report talked a little bit about the study corridors and this idea of being kind of problematic, going back to the notion of implementability and kind of being able to determine up front how reasonable or feasible something is. And I was intrigued by that. There was a staff recommendation to include within this bike plan, and perhaps staff can, as we're concluding, speak to that a little bit. It wasn't raised in the presentation, but maybe clarify the recommendation that was coming from staff. Sounds like you're ready.
Yeah, Madam Chair, this was actually part of a Public Works recommendation that we added because when initially, until, all of us are excited for the updated, the bicycle transportation plan, since we've been using the 2012 version. And in the 2012 version, there was a lot of recommendation for corridor analysis. So we had to, every CIP project that we would do, we would have to perform these corridor analysis to see if it's feasible to put bike lanes or what the ramifications are, what the trade-offs are basically. And it slowed the process basically. So what our recommendation was as part of the new bicycle transportation plan was to have these performed up front and included so that, going back to what Commissioner Avagian was saying or Commissioner Miriam was saying is that we don't go and say, okay, let's do this section and then find out after the fact that, for whatever reason, it's either the real estate is not available to add a bike lane, or for whatever reason, it's, there are trade-offs that have to be decided on. So that was our recommendation to incorporate that. And again, we understand the limitation of the scope of this project and have discussed that with our colleagues at CDD. But again, that was just to bring that issue to the forefront of, going into this. We agree that once something is recommended, we want to implement it. We don't want to see something recommended and then we go and do another study after and find out that, there are complications. So that's what that section was designed to raise that issue and concern.
Thank you. I think that's really interesting, and I think I share some of the frustration and not being able to see the implementation go through. I guess the question is, when you're doing the feasibility, are you kind of looking at the trade-offs now? I wonder if there's a sweet spot so that we're having a plan that is implementable. It's not just pie in the sky, not realistic, but at the same time, we don't know what we won't know in 6 years or when something comes to fruition. So when you're looking at that feasibility, are you doing the trade-offs now? Is that part of it? Or is it kind of queuing up for looking at priorities? I'm not articulating this very well, but there's probably a balance in between where we're not saying yes and no definitely to everything 10 years in advance of when something, might have the money for the capital improvement program.
And Madam Chair, absolutely, that's the $60,000 question, so to speak, is where do you find the balance? That's the part that we are still in discussions with, like I said, our colleagues in CDD as well as the consultant who's working on this project. As we're getting the feedbacks from this commission, from Sustainability Commission, and eventually from City Council, I would suspect that we would have more to say about that as we, as these these recommendations or feedback start lining up together. But at this time, we're still in the information gathering stage.
Okay, thank you. And that kind of raises the previous point that I made about our interest in kind of seeing those details. I think that's the sort of thing that we'd be very interested in better understanding once some initial direction is obtained. All right, so thank you for, that's the analysis question. I was a little curious about another part of the data. So the data on crashes, I just was curious, it looked like it's obtained through, is it like a state agency, or let me ask, how is the data on crashes obtained?
Yeah, thank you. The crashes statewide are reported to a database in a standard format, and it's all like cleaned and well organized, and it's very easy to use this statewide database, the SWITRS database, to get standardized data going back years and years. PD also provided some data that wasn't as comprehensive, and so we relied, and this was a conversation we had with city staff and our PDT, so we relied on the statewide database, which they get their data from your local police department. So they ultimately that's where that data comes from.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I'm just a person, but when I looked at that, anecdotally, I know, for example, my brother was hit while riding a bike, and it didn't show up on the dot. And, there's going to be times where things aren't noted. So that was part of my just personal, curiosity about where that data comes from. And I imagine there are probably some accidents that either don't involve LAPD, or in his instance, he was taken by ambulance, but it was a hit and run, so there wasn't another driver. So the data is so important, and I suspect it's also underrepresented just by the nature of our culture and how how reporting happens.
I'm
Go ahead.
very sorry to hear that. That's terrible. As far as data, the data's only the data's only as good as what is reported.
Right.
And so obviously this doesn't capture everything that happens out in the real world, but this is the data. This is the most comprehensive data that's available to us.
Okay, thank you. And then just to follow up on a couple things, implementability, yes. And in terms of the couple of routes that were kind of mentioned, I agree with Colorado, and in particular, Glendale Boulevard, to me, is such an important avenue. It's pardon me, oh my goodness, here I am talking about how great it is, and I'm not giving the right descriptor. Glendale Avenue, where's the boulevard? That's City of LA. Huh? Atwater, dang it. Okay. Glendale Avenue, so important. And then as it kind of traverses up north to Verdugo. So to me, that was something that was really missing in that connection of a wider bike network, really coming from Atwater. So, okay, well, with that, I had some of my comments, and I wanted to open it back up to some of the discussion points that were raised, and I believe you were going to say something. Either of you? Commissioner Lester.
Just to respond on my comments in terms of them being anecdotal, I mean, yeah, I'm not an expert. I'm a citizen, we're all volunteers here, but that's my experience I felt was worthwhile sharing because I'm a driver. I drive almost every day, but I also ride my bike. So I just wanted to describe my experience in whatever way it could be helpful in explaining what it's like, because honestly, not all that many people do ride to school and that kind of thing. So yeah, and I also, my comments also, I wasn't picking on Glendale. This is a widespread problem. In all the cities in Southern California, I think you can find issues with deadly illegal speeding. I mean, if I'm correct, I think five people died on Glendale Avenue since 2012. I mean, if they're deaths, I think it is something to take seriously. But I wasn't trying to dodge data. The idea was to bring that experience forward. There are, just a little to add a little bit to my comments about how people say they want to do it. I do feel like it sells itself, and thus this idea of deterrence and why people aren't. But, there have been studies. I have a few here that I can mention. This isn't data per se, but study results. But, why is this in the public interest to do this? Well, there's public health. Public health, both in terms of safety, but also there are benefits to active transportation. It's good for you. Not everybody can ride a bike, but are we going to deter people who can? They're going to be on the road causing congestion. If I or someone else might be riding their bike somewhere, they're not blocking your way on the roadway. There's a UK study. It was a 5-year study, over 200,000 people who were biking to work. They found a 41% lower risk of dying prematurely. In terms of public health, I don't know how much better it gets than that. I mean, it's one study and it's not the USA, so that needs to be said. But in terms of equity, there's also kind of a bit of a trope about like, oh, well, this is a elite form of transportation. I don't think that stands up either. There was another study said almost 40% of cyclists were in the lowest earning quartile. So I think a lot of the people with fancy bikes and fancy gear are very visible, but they're still, the largest group of the people are not among the most wealthy or well-to-do. And then like just economically, there's one more point worth mentioning. Indiana was mentioned. There was a study that the lanes added 11% to home values on streets where they were added. And in Manhattan, retail businesses saw sales increase as much as 49%. So yeah, there are compelling arguments for why it's in the public interest to not just allow this to happen, but to take it on as an important part of the pursuit of the public good. So.
Chair, I did have a question regarding the idea of deterrence. And before I ask that question, Commissioner Lester, by no means was I suggesting that anecdotes aren't important and sharing your experience isn't valuable to both myself as a member of the commission and the public in general. I just wanted to caution the weighing of anecdotal information over data. I think it's important to have both, and I think it's important to consider, hard data, because it's less of what you said in that moment and more of what I've been hearing, over the past year or so, from just anecdotal stories trumping actual data. In terms of the deterrence, this idea of deterrence, I have no doubt that there is deterrence. There's some level of deterrence. Anytime a municipality makes choices about different services, they're choosing to promote one thing and potentially deter another. The question I have is, considering the scope of this, is there a way to get a better idea through an actual paid survey, potentially, that would look at a cross-section of the city, have a large enough N to give us, significant results that would ask questions regarding, how likely people might be to ride their bicycle and whether they would be willing to have some of these trade-offs, considering, that there might be trade-offs in terms of creating these types of extensive protected lanes on major city streets. Is there a way to do that? Would the council not benefit from having that type of information rather than these? They're important outreach tools, but I'm not certain how much of a cross section of the actual city these types of online surveys are. They tend to, in my experience, and this is anecdotal, they tend to be largely responded by the people who are most interested in the topic that is being asked about. So is there a way to do a more formalized survey that would look at potential deterrence?
I'm taking that not as a question, but as a comment. Are you asking the question, or are you commenting that it's a good suggestion to look at that?
No, I think it is a good suggestion, but is there a way to actually look at it in a formal way rather than just saying, we know people are deterred, and so let's build some bike lanes and hope that the number of deterred people is large enough that it offsets the potential impacts it might have on others? Is there a way to formally look at that? That's my question.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, your question is really new to us, and for that, I don't know what approach that we need to take to find out how create that trade-off and how effective would be. So at this time, I don't have any right answer for you, but definitely we follow up with that. And we find out is any other jurisdiction have followed that idea, and we figure that out and come back to you. But that's a good question. We appreciate that.
Could I ask a question? On that point, I was wondering, I don't know if it's staff who would answer or not, but I remember with the development of the pedestrian plan, I believe the highest respondent point was concerned with safety. So there was actual return from the public opinion on what was the first priority, if it was safety. And I think wasn't that the case, that it was protected facilities that were the highest? So, yeah, there's the question about how representative are these? Was the survey? Can staff say anything about how the response rate compares to other city surveys that have been done? And, in terms of what can be considered acceptable as a clear indication of a social sanction for projects.
One of the goals that we had from the beginning is that we want to hear both sides, okay, all groups. And our outreach really went far away to reach out to people that really they don't like to ride the bike. They don't like to see the bike. And we reach out to them, and we try to, as much as we could. We didn't knock any door, but we tried. And our goal was that to do that. And we heard some well, obviously most people that come to the survey, they represent different community. We have some community in the North Glendale that were commenting on that and criticizing the things that we are doing, and they were common. We love that, we took it. So the result that you're seeing in front of you is a result of hearing good and bad as much as that we could get, In pedestrian plan, we did the same thing, and our pedestrian plan, one of the successful, won the national level prize on it. But we did go out and try to get any comment we can. But obviously, we didn't knock any door, but we did really extensive reach out to make sure that, everybody's opinion is reflected to our survey.
Thank you. That's important to hear. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Could I just follow up? So my question was, how did the response compare to other city projects for which surveys have been created?
Survey, I can talk about the pedestrian plan and bicycle plan, and public works did quite a bit
Oh,
of
right.
work in that, so.
That's a question
but-
then for Public Works.
Yeah, but those two related to them. Is there any?
We didn't do the pedestrian master plan.
No,
You
no,
guys did.
I didn't, yeah, but, compared to the other project that we have done, pedestrian plan, we had the same type of survey, and we did it, but this one was much higher responded than we got from the pedestrian plan, I would say. Yeah.
Thanks.
This one was really great in this.
One other thing I want to bring up here is when we do compare, let's say, City of Glendale with a European country, cannot compare these two together. I lived in a European country. Means of transportation there is totally different. They have buses, they have trolleys, they have trains, they have taxis, motorbike riders, they have bicyclists, everything. And the infrastructures are already existing. In City of Glendale, none of these things are in place. So, for example, North Glendale, when you talk to people and tell them that, we're going to take one lane away and allow it for the bike lane, which is a great idea in some part of the city. But if you do not create enough transportation capabilities for everybody to be able to utilize it, that's just going to create more problem because all the residents that they live within the vicinity, they're afraid that all those traffics are going to get into their streets. They're going to make their streets more congested. They're going to make their streets more unsafe because the cars that would drive really fast on those other streets are going to come to their streets now. So the implementations is just kind of vague. And the comparison is not right either. So first and foremost, we need to be able to create an environment, a network that actually creates some sort of a transportation that costs very little and people can actually utilize it, like buses, like other means of doing it. Then at that point, when we get there, then we can say, oh, okay, we're now comparing Glendale to, let's say, London, or we're comparing Glendale to Athens, or I lived there. And I walked a lot. And I tell you one other thing, those cities aren't as big as even Glendale. You want to go from one end to the other, it will take you 2-3 hours. That's why nobody decides to take the other one. So let's create a network that accommodates transportation for everyone. And then at that point, little by little, we add bike lanes, we add the other ones. But I say that instead of waiting 10, 15, 20 years, let's implement whatever we can do right this minute. Sharrows, lines, pathways, whatever we can do right now, let's do it now that at least areas that Commissioner Lester mentions, that it is possible to do, and it's less imposive. Let's do that right this minute, and I'm all for it. But let's create that environment. Let's create that measure that people can use alternative transportations. And after that, we can implement it I would love to see a day that City of Glendale be all like bicycles all around. But it has to accommodate everyone. It needs to elevate everybody, not only a few.
Thank you. On that note, I'm wondering if there are any further questions or comments, and if not, do staff members feel that you've received enough feedback from us to proceed? Do you have
I just had one. Could I have one? Oh, were you asking us or them?
Well, kind of both, all. But it sounds like they're going to answer if they have enough feedback. But before they do, you're going to ask a question or give a comment.
Yeah. Could I just real quick again, in particular, this question that I brought up in my first remarks about the possible reinstatement of Glendale and possibly Colorado. I was asking the commission if
Brand Boulevard too.
That one was not one that was on my list, but I had a question about completing the central one. I was interested to know if there was any other support for that idea. I think that you had said.
I noted support for Glendale Avenue in particular, but I'm also supportive of the other two to support my commissioners, my fellow commissioners.
Same.
Does that mean that we have to take a lane out of the street to accommodate bicyclists?
We don't know that yet. This is just the plan to consider.
A meaningful study, I'm all for it, to find out if it is possible. But I mean, if it gets to the point that because as it is, I do travel on Brand Boulevard, I do travel on Glendale Avenue and Central and also Pacific. If that means that you need, and with all those buildings, as I said, there are thousands and thousands of people are coming to those apartment buildings. If you're going to take a lane out, try to make that narrow, and it makes it more, because right now, as it is, I compare today to 10, 15 years ago, it takes me at least 45 minutes longer to get where I want to go, and this is within city of Glendale. So if that means that you have to take one lane out, if you have other alternatives, including bike lanes and other stuff, so we can implement that, if that works, I'm all for it, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Madam Chairman and Commission member, thank you very much for all your comments. We got enough great inputs. We'll look into it and come back to, and we try to work in our PDD group and find out what we can do about it, Just thank you very much for your time and your comments.
Thank you so much.
Chairperson Bonstein, we do have a caller.
I misunderstood you and thought you said, did I have a collar?
No, we have
Nothing around my neck, but I'm glad that someone is on the line. Excellent.
Alexander Yesayant. You're on the air. You have 2 minutes.
Hi, I wanted to put in a couple 2 cents here. Just a couple things. One of the commission members mentioned how there's not a lot of bus options or alternative transportation like that in Glendale, comparing it to European cities. And while we may not be on the level of your average European city or East Coast city in the U.S., it's quite possible to get around Glendale with no car. I, for one, don't bike. I'm not interested in biking, primarily because of safety concerns. But I don't drive. I choose to just use the bus, take the train, take a ride share when I need it. For now, that works great for me. Glendale's a very walkable city. We actually do have frequent bus service. I just came from the train station after work today. There's Beeline buses every 10, 15 minutes. There's Metro Micro. You can call kind of like Uber. And then there's the Metro buses. So if you learn the system, we actually do have pretty decent bus service. Obviously, that doesn't work if you live up in the hills, but at that point, you're driving anyway, so that's a moot point. On the safety issue, so I'm not interested in biking, right? But I'm interested in our city having a usable bike network. Again, that's balanced with all our other needs, so people can use it, get around, get off the streets. That'll actually reduce traffic, reduce pollution, so on and so forth, all the good things we want. Now, there's an asymmetry with safety. If you're biking, you're driving, or you're in a bus or a train, if you're on a bike, if you get hit, you are much more vulnerable than in any of those metal shells that you might be sitting in. You're gonna have serious injury, be paralyzed, you could die. Biking isn't safe when you're hit by a car, a bus, or a train. If you're in a bus, it's like being in a car. Nothing's going to happen to you. All these cars are very safe these days. Airbags, so on and so forth. So there's an asymmetry in safety, which means for bicyclists, you do need to focus on where can we put separated, protected with bollards or just great separation from cars, because a bike hitting a car is not going to harm the car driver. The car hitting the bike is very serious for the biker. So that asymmetry means you need to consider that the bike infrastructure looks very different than car infrastructure. Two cars hitting each other these days, as long as it's at a reasonable speed or even at a high speed, the chances of a serious injury are much less than the bicycle to car interaction that can happen on the road. So again, I just want to put in my 2 cents that even as somebody that I'm not interested in biking unless there's a completely grade separated bikeways all over Glendale, because I don't want to put my life on the lottery line here. And one poor driver, as you know, as a pedestrian, you see them all the time. People just want to get in those right turn on reds. They want to rush through. They don't want to look for pedestrians. Even as somebody that just walks, you find yourself in situations that these drivers are just very careless, unfortunately, because the risk to them is low, the risk to you is high. They're in a car, nothing's going to happen. So I just wanted to offer that perspective that, you know, even if you're somebody that's not really interested in biking, we do need to understand that there is not a huge point putting bike lanes that there's no protection and they're on a busy road. One errant driver is just going to kill you. You know, that's not positive at all. That's not useful. That's putting people at risk. So, and then my second point is Glendale actually does have pretty robust bus network. We have a train station. We have a BRT coming in. The city is changing, and we need to focus on improving that infrastructure. So when all these developments come online, developers don't feel a need to put in as much parking. People feel encouraged to do things other than drive, and driving does not scale with population growth. We're already at a point, it just doesn't scale. Just more people driving, causing problems. There's not enough road space, there's not enough parking. Cars are huge, they take up lots of space. We reach the point where it's just not going to scale going forward, and we need to put in alternatives. And we need to make those as good as possible. No one's taking away streets, no one's taking away freeways. I'll just mention the streets get too congested. Well, find those crisscrossed by freeways, feel free to use those with your car. So hopefully that helps the commission in its future deliberation. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. It sounds like we are concluding this item, and I'm asking what is next on the agenda?
Next item, oral communication. Discussion is limited to item not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. The commission may question the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision.
Thank you. Do we have any callers or speakers for this item?
No, we don't.
Excellent. And then the next item on the agenda, please.
Next item, commission staff comments, updates.
Yeah, I'll just highlight a couple of events that I've attended during the last month. One of them that was very remarkable is Femino Conference. It's female innovation. It's women in business, tech, and innovation, actually. And I was honored to moderate one of the panels, which was on economic inclusion, AI, how it affects economic inclusion, opportunities and challenges. So it was very interesting, and it was very, very honoring to see that many women, very empowering and eminent, being present at an event. So, and then many of them actually came from Glendale, so that was very interesting. And another event that I attended, was actually helped in organizing too. It was a book presentation which took place in Glendale on Artsakh Street, a very, very beautiful street that is closed and it's walkable. It's not a drivable one. And the book was called Babo. It's a tale of Armenian rag washing day. It talks about a tradition that Armenians have on rag washing, and an idea came up to possibly actually making an annual festival, a rag washing festival. So I'll bring it up again and see where it goes with that annual festival. So the book is written by a very, very talented author, Astrid Kamalian, and so thank you for the amazing book. And then Glendale residents loved it. It was a good event. It's actually voted one of the best ones for kids, books for kids, and it's an Amazon bestseller currently. And another event, the last but not least, I attended yesterday, the second branch of Character Dance Studio that was headquartered here in Glendale opened, I believe, 5-6 years ago. The second branch, again, opened in Glendale. I'm very happy they stayed in Glendale. They did not move their second branch anywhere else. And congratulations to the founder, Ellen Harutsunyan, on that. It was great to see her receiving a proclamation from Mayor Brotman and wishing her good luck in her future endeavors. That's it. And welcome, Sylvia. Thank you very much for joining our commission. Thanks again for the wonderful report. And Thanksgiving is coming up, and I would like to thank you guys all for your commitment and service, to all my colleagues and everyone else, and whoever's watching, the community too, whoever's active. So happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be among quality company. And our discussions are always very interesting. And I have a couple updates as well. You reminded me in your presentation that the pedestrian plan did win an award. In fact, I was at the American Planning Association California chapter conference a couple months ago, and Glendale really cleaned up with their awards, I will say, all over the place. But the pedestrian plan won, let me find it here. Let's see, under transportation. So there's so many awards that I have to actually find it. Bear with me. Missing it. Best practices. No. Transportation planning, award of excellence, Glendale City Pedestrian Plan, City of Glendale, congratulations. But also transportation related under urban design, award of excellence, Verdugo Wash Visioning. And we've been here to receive some information on that. And last but not least, actually under economic planning and development award, award of excellence for ARTSOC Creative Retail Pop-Up Pilot as part of the City of Glendale. So good job. And really all of it's related to transportation. And then a final note is more a question kind of on an update of AB 645. We had previously heard about the speed cameras coming to Glendale as one of the cities they will be located, and I was just curious on the timing of that, if anyone happens to know, just to put you on the spot.
Madam Chair, AB 645, there's a commission that has been created, and our own Pastor Casanova is actually one of the members of that. So if you like, I would ask Mr. Casanova to come up and give a brief overview of that, where they are.
Thank you.
To see you again, and welcome to the new commissioner, and happy Thanksgiving to everybody. AB 645 was Assembly Bill 645 was approved by the governor on October 13th of this year, and the laws are slated to take effect January 1st of 2024. Glendale is one of 6 cities that was selected to implement a pilot program for potential speed reduction using automated enforcement. Because of the size of our population, we're limited to 9 systems within the city. We're able to implement 9 in the city. There will be a report required that outlines both the use policies as well as the locations where they were deployed. And it takes into account many different things, including demographics, socioeconomic situations and locations, in order to come up with those 9 locations. So as Mr. Imrani mentioned, Public Works is part of this committee, including the 6 cities that are getting together really to share where we are, what our movement forwards will be in implementing the program and sharing experiences. And we plan to really get started in January of 2024 and paving the way towards this pilot program.
Thank you for the update. Do you have a question? Yes, please.
Pastor Casero, I just have a quick question for you. What is the difference between this AB 645 and the other plan that we had about 12, 13 years ago? I mean, that didn't work, right? The one we had a few years back. And do you know the cost of the older one? That was a pilot program that I think it was in place for 5 years, and they removed them. So what is the difference between these 2 programs?
Yes, thank you for the question, Commissioner Ordubegian. Unfortunately, I wasn't part of that program many years ago, but if I'm not mistaken on the program you're mentioning, that was focused on red light enforcement at intersections. So it would be for vehicles that were running the red light. In this case, this program is going to be focused on speed enforcement, automated speed enforcement. So, but potentially that would look like is these speed type cameras in mid-block locations that would be focused again on capturing pictures of the speeders.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
If you don't mind me asking, you mentioned that Glendale has been selected. Is it something that we as a city applied to be one of the pilot projects, or state selected based on certain criteria? And then the commission was formed, and I wanted to understand if what the commission does and if possibly there should be an involvement from any of our commissioners to be part of it.
Yes, thank you for the question, Commissioner Avagian. I believe Glendale was fortunate enough to have Laura Friedman as a prior, council member here, which is a state assembly member that really piloted and pushed to get Glendale on that list of 6 cities.
And locally, it's also Long Beach in the city of Los Angeles, I understand, and then 3 more cities in the Bay Area.
That is correct.
How about the commission that was formed and our commissioners being part of that?
We can certainly mention to the committee that we'd like to include a commissioner if that's the request. We can look into that and get back to you, certainly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Casanova.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Any other topics not on the agenda?
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody, and welcome, Eric.
Yes.
Hopefully your
please-
first meeting doesn't deter you from coming back to your second meeting.
Thank you. With that, we conclude. Wait, nope. Let me tell you what we're doing. What is the next item on the agenda?
Adjournment.
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you.